Welcome back to another episode of Hot Air with me, Joshua Robert. And today I'm joined by a very special guest, one part of 4 of the Necessary Conversation podcast, Chad. If you have not heard of the Necessary Conversation podcast, you are either living under a rock or not deeply ingrained in family battles based around being very left or right or MAGA or anti-MAGA or all of the things politics. Every week, Chad and his sister, who are very liberal, sit down with their mom and dad, who are very, MAGA. And they discuss the latest news in politics. From AI videos, to Charlie Kirk's murder, to conspiracy theories, and the list goes on. I absolutely love listening. It's such a unique concept that appeals to both Democrats and Republicans. And honestly, it's not really a conversation that we hear a lot about. It's not a conversation that I think many people are having right now. Just talk it through. So let's get into the episode. Let's find out what Chad has to say about his podcast, suggestions he may have for me and the listeners on how they can approach these necessary conversations with their friends and family members. So let's hit it. Welcome to Hot Air, and thank you for joining me today. I am joined by a very special guest who, truth be told, my friends have been sending me your reels from your podcast for a gazillion years, and I don't open her messages because usually it's spammy. So shout out to Jessica, who is like, I've been sending you these reels for a really long time, and now we're here. So thanks, Jessica, for making me figure this out.
Thank you, Jessica.
And sorry for ignoring you for a million years. First, I have one very important thing before we get into your intro, all the things about you and your podcast. I want to touch on this first. From your most recent episode, when you called your mom a furry.
Yeah.
I died laughing. That was so fucking funny. And she was
happy to entertain.
She was so cute with her response to how you ruined her day. And just to be clear, Mary Lou, that's your mom's name, right? Yeah. Is not a furry. She just has a horse that loves her very much.
That she also loves. I mean, we don't know. We don't know if she's actually a furry or not.
Who knows what happens?
She's very into her
doors. Horse. It was just funny. I just cracked up. Honestly, the most recent episode, when I was listening to it, I've listened to it twice through, just so I could be clear. And I found myself laughing, and I'm like, it's such serious subject matter, and I was just cracking up. You guys bring such a cool balance of your humor, your own personalities. I feel like it's so sitcom-y. I'm sure you've heard this many times. Your individual personalities, I think, are so fun and cool. And so why don't we learn a little bit about you and your podcast, The Necessary Conversation?
Sure. It's funny you mentioned that it's sitcom-y. I sold a sitcom based on my family to ABC. Perfect. Probably, Jesus, it's got to be 15 years ago or something, roughly at this point. And we made a pilot where Don Johnson played my dad, Mary Steenburgen played my mom, and Sophia Bush played my sister. And we made it, and then ABC threw it in the trash.
Oh.
As they do with most things, I suppose. But this podcast is called The Necessary Conversation, and it's something that started because my sister and I, who are both very liberal, had not really talked to our parents in a long time. This kind of started happening during Obama, but in the first Trump administration, it really kind of wrecked our family. And somewhere during Biden, I was like, my parents are getting old. They're going to die. Do I really want them to go out the door and have zero relationship with them, basically? So I called up my mom, and essentially they only talk about politics.
Okay.
So I knew that if I was going to engage them in any way, it would have to be about politics. So I called up my mom and I said, hey, I'm thinking about, I've done a bunch of other podcasts. I like podcasting a lot. I think it's a very fun medium. And so I was like, would you be willing to sit down with me for an hour? Let's just see if we can have a conversation for an hour. I'll record it. And if it goes well, maybe we'll do another one. And we started about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. And we were doing it to an audience of basically no one, but it was just a way to kind of keep in contact with our parents. My sister came in, my dad came in. And so for an hour a week, we would sit down and talk, which is something we had not done in a long time. Then about 5 or 6 months ago, I had given my mom the reins to the social media, and she was basically just posting pictures of horses and butterflies and shit all day long. And so about 5 or 6 months ago, I was like,
Oh my
let me
gosh.
just see if I can throw some elbow grease into the social media and really get this thing promoted well. And yeah, it's kind of taken off in those 5 or 6 months.
Yeah, it sure has. I have a lot of friends that listen and are fans. And truth be told, the only other podcast I listen to other than my own are true crime because it's my escape
Ah,
and
sure.
my like think about nothing that actually matters. Well, I guess being murdered matters, but like, in a fun way.
Sure.
So I, until very recently, I've started listening to the more political podcasts and the things that I'm
Yeah,
more
yeah.
passionate about besides people being killed or missing.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so that moment when you realized that you wanted to start the podcast was when you were kind of like, oh, I don't want to not be a part of my parents' life. How long did you guys not speak for?
Uh, there was probably, I mean, we spoke here and there. Like
Mm-hmm.
my sister and I would go back for a birthday or Christmas or whatever, but it would be these, very contentious, shitty experiences where we would just be sitting in my parents' living room silent as Fox News at that time, they weren't into Newsmax yet. Fox News would be like blaring from the living room TV and the one in the
Oh
bedroom
no.
with like a half-second delay. So you were in a literal Fox
Oh
News
wow.
echo chamber, and my dad would just be screaming at us about Obama or whatever. So I mean, we weren't like zero contact. We weren't completely
Mm-hmm.
no contact, but the contact we did have was horrible. And I would say it was that way for, I mean, years, a solid amount of years. Somewhere during Obama's second term is when it really like kicked into high gear for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that time through Trump and Biden, basically, it was that kind of a relationship. And I think this podcast has really helped us to have like a regimented hour a week that we are, at least over Zoom, face to face, speaking to one another, which I think is good. But it also, strangely, and I didn't anticipate this, it has kind of allowed us to keep our political conversations on the show,
Mm-hmm.
so that when we do now go back for birthdays and Christmases and stuff like that, there's a lot less political talk face to face, and it's more just about mainly my mom's horse, honestly. But
Maybe her
it's
being a furry.
yeah, possibly. But I think it has helped us kind of distill down the more toxic elements of our relationship and put them in the podcast.
Okay.
And so that the rest of our relationship is kind of like not free from that, but it certainly is a lot better than it was.
Right. So did your mom take convincing in the beginning to do this, or was she on board?
No, she was pretty on board. I just said, "Hey, do you want to have this conversation?" And the first episode that we ever did, the first maybe like 2/3 of the whole show are audio only. We weren't doing video or anything. And I think that that's like a little bit of an easier way to ease into something
Mm-hmm.
like this as well. Cause it's like, you're not going to be on YouTube. There's no video of you. It's just like whoever wants to listen to you kind of like rant about whatever. But that first episode wasn't, we didn't talk about contemporary political topics at that time. It was mainly a kind of background about my mom, how she grew up, what were her parents' political leanings, when did she first kind of get into politics. And the first 3 audio episodes are that of my mom, my dad, and my sister. And I think that kind of, it was just a conversation. It wasn't like, "Hey, did you see what Trump did? I bet you support it. Fuck you." It wasn't that.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, "Tell me about your childhood and how you kind of have arrived at this place in your life where you think these things."
Right.
And I think that was just like an easy way to start it. And it didn't take any convincing. My mom has always wanted to be famous. She has always perceived this thing we're doing as a possible outlet to
Mm-hmm.
that end. My dad is extremely jealous and thinks he has to be, in quotes, the star of the show. So he immediately was on board because my mom was. And then my sister, is already, even prior to this podcast, has like a pretty big social media following and is very politically outspoken. So she was down to do it from the beginning as well.
I love that. That's so cool. I anticipated that there would have been some pushback or maybe not. I specifically was like, I feel like your dad might not have been on board, but I love that he's like trying to be the star here. That's so cute.
Absolutely.
So, and I do have questions about your parents and their upbringing, your upbringing a little bit later.
Mm.
You touched on it a little bit, but I am curious what now would constitute a necessary conversation to you?
I mean, to me, the meaning of it is obviously, like, it's got a few meanings. One is, like, in a very specific way, it's a necessary conversation for my family specifically,
Mm-hmm.
our little unit of 4 people, to keep us in contact. But the kind of broader meaning is that I really do think in this country, it's, the two sides don't talk. If you see somebody who's like, I assume you're not a Trump voter. Um,
Little did you know.
yeah, this is you brought me on here to ambush me.
Yes.
Um,
Your mom's actually here with me.
I would shit my pants. It's if you see somebody wearing a MAGA hat or they voted for Trump or something like that, you immediately discount them as piece of shit. I'll never talk to them, whatever, blah, blah, blah. That may be true, by the way, but you don't know unless you talk to him. But whatever the case, once Trump is gone, something will have to happen in this
Mm-hmm.
country where that idea that we all have, that the person on the other side of this imaginary political line is a complete asshole, deranged, whatever. However, and by the way, MAGA thinks that about the left too.
Right.
That has to end, or this country is like this for another whole generation. And I don't see any other way to do that other than having conversations with people on the other side of that line in a way that is not, I mean, as much as you can make it, not combative, that's just like, I get it. You voted for this guy. Maybe you think he's good, or maybe at this point you think he lied to you and tricked you and you're starting to come around to that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But whatever the case is, we're both citizens that live in this country.
Right.
And we have to at least be able to get back to where it used to be, that it was like, yes, maybe you voted for somebody different than me, but I don't want you arrested or dead or deported or, all these things.
Right. And if your sister does get arrested, at least your mom will bail her out.
And so she says.
So she'll leave her in there for like a few days, but we'll get her
exactly.
eventually.
She's got to learn her lesson.
Yeah, those conversations are so challenging, especially for me, because I am one of those people that used to get very heated. And I think that's why I reached out to you originally, because I was hoping that I could learn something from you, from watching and listening to your podcast, how, you guys do get heated. I curse every other second when I'm really pissed off. So it's very hard for me to relay what I'm trying to say. I've been in very heated conversations with multiple people in my family and parents. I'm Canadian, so they are, some of my family's a little conservative in their own way, in their own Canadian way.
It's not quite the same.
It's not
where
quite
are you
the
from
same
in Canada, if I may
outside
ask?
of Toronto.
Okay. What town?
It's called Waterloo Region. It's like a little 3-town, Cambridge, Waterloo, and Guelph.
Okay.
Nobody goes there. It doesn't matter.
I spent some time in Toronto. I like
Toronto's
that
good, yes. But what's interesting is that I do have some family members that do like Trump. Maybe not so much now. The last time I spoke to them about politics, and I also sounded very Canadian there, about Trump and politics and gun violence and all of that, they were kind of on the more Republican side, which I find very interesting. But I have now not had any of these conversations, even though it's become even more important to me because I get so worked up. So I'm hoping that I'll learn something today and that the listeners will also learn something, because I do agree that it is so important to talk these things through and adopt and by the way, some of the perspectives.
I would say that the responsibility of starting that conversation is on the left. The right is never going to do it. There's got to be a kind of, I think, an acceptance by people on the left that, at least this is how I kind of view it. My parents are brainwashed, and I think a lot of people in the MAGA camp are. So I really do view them as victims. Now, set that aside. Is my dad an asshole? Yes. Like, whether he's a victim or not, that doesn't exonerate him from certain things, obviously. But I think if you can kind of recontextualize it in that framework and not see these people as like mean, malicious pieces of shit, but instead victims of billionaires who are literally leveraging new technology to trick people, to get them watching their phones longer, to keep them in a perpetual cycle of anger and fear because it makes them money. If you can see them as that, then it becomes a little easier, I think, to like listen to what they're saying, realizing that they just don't get it because there are the most powerful people in the world have made it that way. They're counting on them not getting it because they make money off of their confusion.
Right. Especially with social media. Good example is my mom believes everything that she sees on social media. She sent me a picture of an otter holding a rock shaped like a heart, smiling. and she thought it was real. And she was like, "Isn't this otter the cutest little thing?" It was very clearly AI. So like that
Yeah.
generation, they really just believe anything. Because I mean, growing up, there of course there was conspiracies and lies and whatever, but it was nothing like today. Anyone can publish anything and say anything. So I do kind of, I will take that forward, thinking of them as unfortunate victims of the current climate.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So I'm curious, when you guys do your podcast, do you guys ever set any kind of boundaries? Are you ever feeling or do you have like a little safe word, or does it get really really heated? Do you ever like slam the computer and walk away, or do you guys kind of finish it off, figure it out?
No, I mean, we don't have any boundaries. We've never gotten so mad that we've stopped an episode or anything. I don't I've only had to edit one thing out of the podcast
Oh
ever.
wow.
When I edit it, I'm like, the editing is really just taking the different video files and like arranging them on the screen so it looks
Hmm.
okay, and that's it. And then uploading it. Like, I don't really edit content ever.
Okay.
I'll bleep out some words here and there if my dad says some kind of racial slur or whatever. But we had one episode where I think it was in the Simmer Down, some conversation came up that was like about our extended family, and my parents were pissed about that, and so they made me cut it out. And that was it.
Oh wow.
Um, we've There's like almost no editing done on that show at all. I would say literally over the span of it, 99.9999999% of what we've recorded is actually there in the show.
Okay. I also went down a comment rabbit hole on your post, and there was a bunch of comments that were like, "I don't know if this is going to last long. Like, it's getting really heated," and people saying that this podcast might not continue because due to the subject matter conversations. How would you respond to that?
I mean, look, it's all four of us are coming to this at will. I would say in terms of the, kind of work behind the scenes, I'm doing 100% of it.
Hmm.
My parents and my sister literally just show up and record, and their part in it is done. So it's kind of like a pretty low bar in terms of like effort required. Yes, for them anyway. Um, the conversations can get heated, but I just don't I don't think it will end. I mean, obviously, ultimately, all things will end, but I don't think we're like, under threat of that happening
Right.
now. I think even as as we get, the week that happens in between the episodes is enough time to cool off, and obviously crazy shit is happening every day in the news. So I think that helps too, that there's like, oh shit, my mom wants to talk about Jimmy Kimmel, or my mom
Hmm.
was, whatever, James Comey getting indicted today. That's going to be a big topic on our next
Right.
one. So it's like there's enough stuff in the news that I think we all want to discuss and see how, like, I'm always curious when that Jimmy Kimmel thing happened. I'm like, fine, this has to be the thing.
Right.
My parents have to see this, and now finally realize Trump is an authoritarian dictator trying to control
Yeah.
everything. They have to see it, and of course they don't. I'm constantly surprised by their ability to just ignore the truth. But to answer the question, no, I don't think we're close to ending the podcast.
Good. Love that. Do you ever pause and think like, "Oh wow, I'm really deep in the left. Have I been radicalized by the left?" Because I have that thought lately, and
Of
I'm like,
course.
"Who am I? Like, what's happening?" I need to
Yes.
pause and think about things for a hot second.
100%. 100%. I think about it constantly. I'm always trying to like kind of get into my parents' heads, and be like, well, how can they think this? Let me really like logically go down a path and see if I can arrive at any of the same conclusions. And then that ultimately, almost immediately, you flip that back on yourself, and you're like, well, wait a minute though. I've arrived at whatever conclusions I've arrived at
Hmm.
based on the videos I watch on YouTube and the news I take, and whatever. Um, but I don't ultimately, I think because I have kind of scrutinized my own views to such a degree, I'm pretty confident that I have not been radicalized in the same way my parents have.
Right.
I'm not buying Joe Biden perfume and Joe Biden Bibles. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I don't like Joe Biden. I'm not like so deep on the left that I can't see the bad things they do,
For sure.
and I can't have some kind of like opinion negative against the party. And my parents are that way. So yeah, I have thought about that, and I think that's a good thing. Like, everybody should always kind of question why they believe what they believe. Just check in with themselves and make sure, like, yes, this is still what I think the world or reality or whatever is.
Mhm.
And if you don't, by the way, if your mind changes on something, that's fine. That's
Totally.
part of being fucking human.
Yeah. I say every week my mind changes. Like some episodes I say one thing and then I listen to it back, and the next week I might have a totally different perspective, but not everybody has that ability to kind of shift gears and be like, actually, I don't feel great about this. I'm going to change my mind. I don't think we all possess that talent.
Well, I think that's one of MAGA's kind of biggest pitfalls, is the idea that they cannot change their mind. And so now you're in a position where you're worshiping this guy who's contradicting himself basically daily, but you have to maintain some adherence to the belief that what he said is real or true or right. And it's like, but he's saying the opposite thing. So which one is right? Well, whatever he says is right. And they can't also admit that maybe they were tricked. Maybe they were wrong. And I think that's a huge part of just the kind of bullheaded, like, stubbornness of MAGA. I think that's why, again, the impetus to have this conversation has to come from us, because they ain't going to do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, I don't feel so bad now that I question whether I have been pushed so far left that I'm losing my mind. So that's good.
Yeah. You know what? I started going down some goddamn rabbit holes where I'm like, okay, now I'm going crazy. I don't know if you've seen this on TikTok, Instagram, whatever. It's kind of everywhere at this point. They're comparing this 1998 movie called Snake Eyes, this Nicolas Cage movie, to the Charlie Kirk assassination. Have you seen this?
I've seen one meme, but I didn't really get it.
Okay. There are all these weird similarities in that movie. So the movie's premise is there's a big boxing match that's taking place in Las Vegas, and there's going to be a giant crowd, thousands of people live in person watching it. And the kind of like ne'er-do-wells have planned an assassination to take place at that event of a sitting U.S. senator. That senator's name, the senator gets shot in the neck. His name is Charles Kirkland.
God.
It occurs on September 10th, which is when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And one of the guys in the boxing match, his name is Tyler, just like the assassin. So on and so forth. There's like there's a bunch of other little synchronicity kind of things. Okay. And I'm just like, this is fucking insane.
No, that's wild.
And I mean, I have some very strange views on the nature of reality. I'll say that much. But it brings into question, like, how many coincidences there have to be before we start saying, like, what is going on here?
Right. My initial reaction was, well, how do you feel about the simulation or the Matrix or whatever? But we're not going to go there.
Exactly.
That's not what this is about. But
all right.
I see where you're going.
About that.
I see where you're going here. But that's far too many circumstances. And now I'm like, okay, I need to watch that movie tonight.
Yeah, you need to watch some of those videos.
That's crazy.
It's very bizarre.
I did text my friend. Her name is Joy. Shout out Joy. She always listens. And she is, I love a conspiracy theory, even if I don't believe them. I just think it's such an interesting chain of thought. And so I was like, what if, and just to be clear, I've said it, I do not agree with what happened with Charlie Kirk's murder, any of that, nor do I agree with any of his statements when he was alive. But I was like, what if it was pretend, and what if they bring him back and they're going to pretend that he's like Jesus? And so I also had just smoked a lot of weed. So my mind was just like going crazy. And I was like half in a sleep, half out of a sleep. So, kind of in like a dream state.
We've all been there.
And then I woke up and I was like, oh my God, did I have a premonition? Is this going to happen? So I text her and she's like, I've had the exact same thoughts. It's just like wild that is even a thought process. And now adding that movie in there, which I had no idea about.
It's like, it's wild that it's a thought process, but you have to look at like Trump's assassination or the attempted assassination on him. I mean, I would say it's maybe 50-50 in terms of like people in America that believe it was real versus that they put on a little show for us.
Right.
If they put on a show for us, if they're capable of doing that, you don't think they'll do it again?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't know what to make of all of it, is my kind of bottom line on it. It does seem like there's a lot of very weird, suspicious shit surrounding both of those events. It can't be taken at face value, specifically the text messages that he supposedly sent that are the one where it all sounds weird, like the tone of it, but there's a piece of it where the text message is like, they detained two guys who had nothing to do with it, da 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 da. And it's like, how would he have known that if he's literally fleeing the scene?
Right.
That makes no sense whatsoever. Those text messages, at the very least, I think, are completely fake.
Oh, for sure. They're very odd. Just doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. R.I.P. Charlie, I guess. Moving on. We're going to get into, I do have some LGBTQ focused questions, since this is an LGBTQ plus podcast. And I don't
Sure.
don't want you to, put words in your parents' mouth or speak for them, but
Mhm.
I am curious if you can give me a little Cliff Notes version of your parents' perspective or conversations that you and your sister have had with them regarding LGBTQ plus issues.
Well, I think the LGB part of that they're okay with.
Mm-hmm.
It's really the T
Mm-hmm.
that they got no love for,
Okay.
and I don't get it. I truly don't. It's so bizarre to me, but they are seemingly, at least in the recent conversations we've had on the show, they kind of want to position every ill that is happening in America as the fault of trans Americans.
Right.
I don't get it. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. They're constantly using arguments about like, um, in terms of like trans healthcare. They're only 0.01% of the population. Who cares? They don't deserve shit. But then when there's a mass shooting, they're immediately like, it's the trans people doing
Mm-hmm.
it. But that same like idea doesn't apply, that if there's such a small percentage of the population, they don't matter. Oh, but they are all we focus on when some tragedy happens. It's very strange. Um, but again, it's like it's the messaging coming out of the MAGA talking
Right.
heads, that I mean, I remember when Charlie Kirk's assassination first happened, within like an hour or two of it, all over TikTok, there was somebody had put like, I've identified the shooter. Here it is. And they threw out a TikTok account of some trans person.
Mm.
And then that person got doxxed and
Oh,
their
no.
whole life got upended and shit. And obviously had nothing to do with
Right.
this. I don't get it, quite frankly. But yeah, my parents are very transphobic. Like I said, I don't think they have any problem with anyone being gay.
Mm-hmm.
It's really trans people for some reason that is like their new boogeyman.
Right. I mean, there's even people in the queer community, gay men, that don't think that the trans community should be kind of connected to the gay or
Hmm.
lesbian or bi part of it, which I disagree with. But so on the flip
Yeah.
side of that, where do you and your sister stand? Are you just like free for all? Everybody's welcome. We're all good.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I have no problem with anything. Everybody should have basic human rights,
Right.
right to health care, no matter what. It's just that it's so strange to me. The arguments they used to about like, oh, you want a fucking guy going into a woman's bathroom? And it's like, even if that was the case, which it's not, even if it was, who gives a shit?
Mm-hmm.
Who cares? Like, it's just so strange to me. But it's part of, I think, what Trump has done very well, and it plugs right into my parents, who have what I perceive to be a very adversarial worldview. It's like it's us against someone or something at all times. Who is the enemy, basically? And Trump just says, that's your enemy, that's your enemy, that's your enemy. It's Democrats, it's trans, it's whoever. And so if Trump points the finger at somebody, they eat it up. And I think that there is, in all authoritarian regimes, there is that need to say, that's the other. They're the reason for everything bad in your life.
Right.
And trans people have become that in Trump's administration.
Yeah. I think what people don't realize about being trans is you don't just wake up one day and go, okay, I'm going to go get a sex change. Like, you have to go through, years of therapy and years of the pills and hormones, and you can schedule your appointment to have your gender reassignment surgery, and it will probably be 12 months, if not more, out. I think that a lot of people on the right just think it just happens like that. People just do it so they can go use the bathroom. But if a man wants to use the woman's bathroom, he's going to use it anyway. They're just going to go ahead and do it. They're not going to transition so that they can just get in there.
It's wild. And it's like, I don't know how many videos you have to see of, like a young trans person saying basically that my ability to transition saved my life, because they're in such dire mental health situations prior to being allowed basically to do it. It's like, it is life affirming, life saving medical care. I just don't get, I don't know. It's one of the things that I really struggle with my parents. They are racist. They are transphobic. That's kind of one of the hardest things to get around in that podcast.
Totally.
And I know that that's just like, it's deep. That shit's in them. So like, I may be able to get them to come around on Trump or something. I think those ships have sailed, certainly with my dad. But there's a part of that too that's kind of like, we all have people in our lives that think differently than us, and in some ways monstrously so. But it's like you have to somehow come to terms with that if you want there to be any semblance of like an America, or as I perceive my family to be kind of like a microcosm of America, if you want there to be any semblance of a like an ability to have a relationship with one another, even if they have these views that you find wildly terrible, which I do, you gotta, I don't know. It's not that I ignore those views. It's just like more of an acceptance of like, they view these things that are clearly wrong, but they're still my parents.
Right. That's interesting because I'm not good at that. Even with friends, like I can't separate that. I'm like, oh, you're
Yeah,
dating like a Republican who's racist. Like, what does that say about you? I don't know
sure.
how I navigate that. But have your parents ever met a trans person? Do you know?
I would guess no.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know specifically, but I would guess no. I have to assume no.
Right.
Well, yeah, I have to assume no. I don't know. I say no. I say no. I don't know.
Yeah.
The answer is I don't know, but probably not.
Yeah. I think that's a really big factor in a lot of it is
Of course.
I have two trans friends. One more of an acquaintance. But before that, I had no idea. Did I care? No. But
Mm.
in meeting her, at first I wasn't aware that she was trans. And then I was like, this girl is so legit, so genuine, so real. And finding out that she's trans, it made the most sense. And I personally
Mm.
find the trans community, once you meet them and you understand that they're just regular human beings, how authentic they are and the things that they've had to go through to get there. I think
Totally.
if people maybe like your parents, they probably wouldn't be
Mhm.
comfy or happy to meet them. But I think that's something that shifts a lot of people's mindset.
Oh, for
Or I
sure.
hope it
I think
does.
too, there's my girlfriend and I watched 90 Day Fiance.
Hmm.
For whatever reason, that show almost every season has a trans person in it. And
Oh,
I'm just like, the kind of like, and I know it's reality TV and whatever, people think it's frivolous. I actually think reality TV is the most important media being created. But I think that's a part of it too. Just like representation in these kind of public
right,
forums, to be like, no, look, it's just a person who wants to get married and, has somebody that loves them and that they love. Like that's all it is.
right. Ed from 90 Day Fiance? Like,
Oh
no,
yes, of course. Big Ed. Yeah.
yeah, I was going to say something else. He goes to my grocery store, so I see him all the time
Oh my
too.
God.
An
Oh,
8-minute walk
that,
down the road.
that's a
Good
blessing.
old Ed. Actually, I haven't
Congratulations.
seen him in a while, but
Oh,
I used to see him all the time at the grocery store, which is hilarious.
yeah, he's probably the most famous person from that show.
For sure. All right. So we did talk a little bit about how your parents, they were raised a certain way. Some things like racism and homophobia or transphobia are ingrained in them. And again, I don't want you to
Mm.
have to speak for them, but can you touch a little bit about the conversations you've had in regard to their upbringing? That's how your podcast started, your mom explaining her
Yeah.
experience.
They grew up in a small town called Great Bend, Kansas, which is like right in the middle of the state, a very small population. And, they grew up in the 50s. So I'm not even sure they were exposed to anybody who wasn't white until maybe they went to college. And like, or no, my dad was in the army or in the Air Force, I guess. That's where we did a whole episode where we talked about the origins of his racism. He seemed to think that it was because when he was in the Air Force, there was a time where, as he put it, a black guy didn't make his bed and they all had to like do extra running or something, whatever, thing. And I'm like, so that one thing is now why
Right.
you hate an entire, like everyone that's not you. It doesn't, I don't even believe that story is real, to be honest, but he claims it is. I think it is more about like small town, middle America in the 50s. Racism is just like a part of that. And you either have to grow up and realize like that ideology is wrong. And I will now correct how I think about
Hmm.
this. And maybe, like you're saying, that comes from having personal experience with people outside your race or whatever. Um, but for them, it just never did, because I think they kind of stayed in that like Bible Belt area. They've never left that. They've lived in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, and that's it. And it's just, I mean, the stereotypes I think about those parts of the country in terms of like their draconian views on race, sexuality, gender, I think those are true. I mean, my parents are examples of it.
Right. So then when you and your sister were growing up, I imagine that was kind of passed on to you.
Certainly it was attempted to, but by the time we lived in Dallas when I was a kid, so like it wasn't small town Kansas anymore, you know. And I played a lot of sports and had every variety of race on all teams that I played on, and those kids were like my friends and stuff, you
Right.
know. I just think by virtue of maybe living in a bigger city or something, it didn't work on me and my sister because we had, like you're saying, firsthand accounts of like, well, no, I like this guy. He's fun. He's gonna come over and play GI Joes or whatever. Um, it just didn't work on us. And then we both left, or I guess I came to LA to go to college. And, you know, my dad puts it like, you went to that stupid liberal school and that's what made you such a lefty. Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
Like it's possible. But yeah, I think the ideology just didn't stick on us because we were growing up in a different era too, in the 90s. It just wasn't like 1950s small town Kansas.
Right.
We were in a big city, like a suburb of a big city in the 90s.
Right. You know, it's interesting because on the side, I do personal training at a private golf country club, and I have clients that
Oh,
are in
wow.
their 80s, and some of them are very racist. Sometimes
Yeah.
I just can't even move my face because if I make any type of reaction, it probably won't go well. And then others are so open and
Mm.
free, and you know, sometimes I walk into work and I'm like, I don't know who I'm going to encounter today that is part of a demographic that isn't cool with me. But I find it so interesting that, you know, people that can be the same age, 85
Mm.
years old, one person can love me and one person can hate me. And one guy
Yeah.
was also in, I think he was in the Navy, and he had spoken a little bit about going to war and whatnot and how that added to his perspective on anyone who is not white. But then on the flip side, I have a woman who lived in New York, who lived in a busy city, who had the exposure to different cultures and different peoples and different ways of life. And she's literally said to me our first time working together, "Oh, I love the gays." And her
Mm.
name's Polly and she's 81, and it was hysterical. And I was like, okay, we're good. But I find it so interesting that people from the same generation can be so vastly
Yeah.
different. But just like the youth of today, all the people that supported Charlie Kirk and then the ones on the flip side who did not, what do you think kind of is like the biggest belief system that is being passed down to those youth, or the reasoning for them to go extremely right specifically?
I mean, I think now the only belief system really that matters, maybe globally, but certainly in America, is celebrity worship.
Hmm,
And so it's just a matter of like, what celebrity do you choose to worship? That's like really it. Fame is all that
interesting.
matters.
Okay.
It's what gave us our current president. It's what will give us our next presidents for the foreseeable future. Whoever controls their persona on the internet the best basically is going to win everything.
Right.
Um, so in terms of like what belief systems are getting passed down through that, it's all the same ones. You have some people who want these kind of like, it really, in my mind, is about competition versus cooperation. The MAGA Republicans are 100% competition. And that means you have to lose. If we're going to win, you have to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Zero sum game at all times. And that's kind of their ideology. And so that perpetuates itself in racism, homophobia, all of the kind of isms that are at their nature highly competitive. I am this, you are different in some way, therefore you must lose. That means I'm going to take away your health care, put you in jail, deport you, whatever. That's like winning the game against these others, basically. And then people who are on the other side who are cooperative are like, no, everybody should have everything. How can I help? Let me go protest. Let me donate money. Let me, you know,
Right.
volunteer time, whatever. And that's the way it's kind of always been, I think. I think the kind of like yin and yang of, is our society more competitive or more cooperative, has been since that way since the dawn of like human civilization, really.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything that could change that?
That's hard to say. I mean, I think
Other than getting a new
this is a
president,
much
maybe?
broader, I don't think politics will ever change,
Right.
because that's inherently a competitive game. I have to win an election. I have to beat
Mm-hmm.
you. Therefore, what I'm presenting as my persona or ideology has to be opposed to you in some way. And that opposition, it necessarily means there's going to be two sides, a winner, a loser, blah, blah, blah. I think the question is like bigger than just politics. Can it ever change? The things that are, and this is going to get very weird, but I don't care. This is how
Do
you
it.
ask
I
the
love
question.
weird.
Here's the answer. All right. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. I think just like in human culture, that is opening some doors of possibility to the fact that like none of this is very likely real. And I'm not even saying suggesting like a computer simulation necessarily. Um, but that consciousness kind of like at a fundamental level is what true reality is, and all of this is a reflection of it. But we are learning some interesting stuff scientifically, specifically in quantum theory, about what is the real nature of matter and can we affect it with our consciousness? And
Mm-hmm.
the answer is yes. So we're getting into this area where like psychic phenomena and stuff, and being able to like have real true empathy by like connecting with somebody else's consciousness is starting to happen in ways that are becoming far more public. um and I think, every once in a while it seems like we're on the verge of some kind of big societal shift to a far more cooperative society. I would say like in the late 60s with the hippie movement,
Mm-hmm.
we were on that path, and then it got shut down by the hyper competitive government. We're going to kill all the civil rights leaders, fuck the hippies. Charles Manson comes in, hippies are now the devil, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it. That's over. And that ushers in the 70s and 80s, which is like ultra corporate competitive money, greed,
Right.
cocaine. And we're kind of stuck in that cycle perpetually. But I'm hopeful that maybe in our lifetimes there will be this kind of like drastic shift, because it needs to happen with global warming, everything that's going out of control with late stage capitalism. There are like massive things happening to the planet that have to change drastically, or we're all fucking dead.
Right.
And so I'm hopeful that maybe some of those things will happen. I don't think it'll have anything to do with politics, though.
Okay.
It has more to do with the people who have the money.
Right. Which right now they're not the best people to have the money.
No, they're the politicians
Right.
as well. Like it's all one and the same
Right.
at this point.
Yeah, totally. So do you ever feel, because you have so many episodes and you kind of mentioned this a little bit in the top, but do you ever feel like you're having the same conversation over and over, like you're on a hamster wheel, like you're in a time loop?
Yeah, a little bit, but I can see my mom is starting to crack a little
Mhm.
bit. I think there is like actual progress being made with her.
Yes.
With my dad, no, right?
Right.
My dad is that guy, and he almost like takes pleasure in annoying people. Almost, he definitely takes pleasure in annoying us, in making us mad, and whatever. He's a troll, and I think that that's like a part of why he likes Trump so much too. They're all trolls
Totally.
together. But my mom, I think we are getting through to her, and like I said, I view them as victims that are in a cult, that they are sucked into this thing. And I know like getting people out of cults does not happen overnight. It is a long, laborious process, usually done by people that these cult members love to say,
Mhm.
I'm still here for you. Remember who you were before you were in this cult. And obviously don't call it a cult, but to just be there for them and like slowly nudge in the right direction until eventually they have that moment where they're like, oh my fucking God, they were right the whole time. And I think we're getting her, inch by inch closer to that moment.
Right.
Which is kind of my real goal with that show.
Okay. And it's interesting because when I was listening again today, I was like, oh, like your mom is she seems, at least from what I've heard, obviously I only get an hour, snippet here and there,
Mhm.
open to thinking or feeling other ways. And, I have not listened to like, episode 1, 2, 3, or 4, like
Sure.
where I imagine her perspective and experience is vastly different. And on the other side of that with your dad, I was going to also say the same thing. Is he like that in real life? Because it seems like he's just, he drops little funny things in there where he's like, oh, I'm just going to say this to like irritate everyone.
Yeah, I mean, he is like that in real life. He's kind of,
Which is entertaining
become
for
more
us listening,
subdued.
but maybe not for you.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's how my sister and I grew up.
It's
He was
hysterical.
more, he's like, in his early 70s now. He's had 2 hip replacements. He's like slowed down for sure. But like if you can imagine, a younger version of him was like even more hostile, kind of
Mhm.
constantly. So yeah, my sister and I, in terms of like his comments and stuff, we're immune to it because we had to grow up in that environment.
Right.
But yeah, that's the guy. That's who he is.
And then do you and your sister, like after you record, do you guys ever go like, oh, what the fuck, or vent to each other or talk about it, or when you're done, you're done?
Yeah, she and I will have conversations, not every week, but we will sometimes have conversations off the show,
Mhm.
talking about the show.
Right.
But more often than not, it's talking about what we're going to do with my dad and if they need help with his hip surgeries and all that kind of shit.
Right.
You get to a certain age and it's like, this is another like piece of why I want to do this podcast, I guess. The kind of like just general nature of the human lifespan dictates that you're going to have to take care of your parents at some point.
Mm-hmm.
We are at that point. And so it's, those conversations become more serious about what's going to happen.
Right.
And both my sister and we're pretty resolute that we don't want to just like abandon them. And that is what would have happened had we not started this podcast,
Okay.
I think.
Well, that's nice. It's a plus side to the, I'm sure, stressful conversations.
Yeah.
All right. So I've got a few more little questions.
Sure.
I would like to know, if there even is one, what has been the hardest truth that you've had to face, maybe about yourself or about your family, while doing your podcast, if anything at all?
For me, I think the hardest thing is like the final realization that my dad is gone. The guy I grew up with is not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Some part of me when we first started this podcast was like, he's got to be in there. Let me see if I can get to him. And I have given up on that. Like, I don't think he is salvageable, unfortunately. But my mom is, and that's kind of like really my driving goal with this. But yeah, that realization it's bad because I mean, you have these memories of growing up with this guy as your dad, and like, yes, he was like abusive and bad in many ways, but still, he's your dad, and he did a lot of good stuff for me and my sister as well,
Mm-hmm.
which we're thankful and grateful for, and all of that. But just that there's no, this person who has raised you, who you spent many years of your life with, doesn't seem to want to know who you are as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't seem to give a shit about anything that makes you interested in the world or what drives you. None of that. All he can do is parrot Trump talking points. That's
Right.
literally, he's just a robot doing that 24 hours a day. Whatever person is in there, like, I can't get to that person either. That realization is, it's shitty, but I just don't know any way around it,
Right. When did you come to that realization? Was there a moment when you were like, all right, I gotta just accept this as it is?
Yeah, it was probably about like maybe a year and a half into the podcast, somewhere around there, where it was kind of like what you're saying, just an issue of tonnage. Like, how many times are we going to have the same episode where he's just like literally verbatim saying what Trump said
Mm-hmm.
and nothing else? And it just kept going on. And at a certain point, I was just like, he's fucking gone.
Right.
I don't know what to do.
Right.
It's terrible. But then I'm also kind of like, even as I'm saying this, I'm like, but if I can turn my mom, maybe that'll turn him.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that would get him to make some movement
Right.
Toward truth. I don't know. But yeah, I would say that for me is probably the hardest thing.
Yeah. I mean, completely different scenario, and part of the reason that I wanted to talk to you was specifically, I have issues with my family about allyship and understanding me, not politically, but as a grown adult, not 16-year-old me. And they're all very supportive, but it's kind of the same idea where I'm like, if just one of my siblings would, go to my dad and be like, come on, we got to like support Josh a little better. Like, and they do in their own way, but like, saying I love you is not enough. Understanding, especially now, how wild it is for the community, the queer community. So I think it's a very similar thing. I haven't lost all hope yet, but I'm always like, if maybe my stepmom will just go to my dad, or maybe my sister will be like, come on, we gotta talk about this. So I would, hold out some hope. If we can convert your mother, then you never know what can happen.
Right. Sure.
Right. Okay. So 2 more things. If somebody listening wants to start these conversations with their parents, because they are very important, it's very easy to ignore and just breeze over it or not talk to people. Truly, I haven't talked to my dad in like 4 or 5 months, and I don't want to live like that forever. So what is your advice for anyone who wants to have these necessary conversations with their family and or friends?
Start a podcast.
Oh, perfect.
I mean, there's something about like the regimented nature of, okay, every Sunday we're going to talk to each other for an hour. And because it's recorded, because we're putting out a show, you can't really bail out of that. You can't say, no, I can't show up this week or whatever. There's something about like having it scheduled and recording it, in my opinion, that it obligates you to do it every week. If you don't have that obligation, even if you schedule it, I think it's easy to like bail out, or sorry, I can't this week or whatever.
Right.
But having like a regimented scheduled time that you have the conversation with them, I think is like huge.
Right.
It gets you in a regular relationship.
Okay.
So it's not like one big blowout screaming match and then you don't talk for 6 months. It's okay, we're going to do this every week. We're going to look at each other and be here present for an hour. And then also just to not, if you can, don't get mad about any of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And for what it's worth, like I really have a very detached view of reality generally. Like as I've said a couple times on the show already, I don't think this is real. That helps. But I think also if you can, like a piece of why the podcast helps is because I view that hour as like a TV show.
Okay.
And us as characters in it. So I can kind of take my personal attachment to the views and the things that are being discussed completely out of it and see it almost as a sitcom, like you said in the very beginning.
Right.
That makes it like way easier. I know intellectually my parents are not characters in a TV show. They are real people. They are actually my parents, all of this. But at least for that hour, I can kind of like sit back and I'm almost like, even though I'm a character in it too, I'm almost watching the show as it's happening instead of getting like emotionally heated about the stuff we're talking about.
Good point. Well, I'm going to try that. I love that. I always say to my friends, I'm like, if you're nervous about a job interview or something, pretend you're an actor. You're auditioning for a role. Like, I mean, that's why I moved to LA, right? To audition for 700 different things. Or if I'm nervous about doing a podcast episode, I'm like, you're playing the role of a podcaster. You're showing up and you're not Josh. You're Josh, but you're not Josh if you don't need to be. So that's a really good point. So one last thing, is there anything, that you want to kind of add on? Anything you feel like you want to say? Or what do you hope listeners take away from either this episode of us together or your podcast? The biggest takeaway for listeners.
Man, I really think, I mean, for me, I guess the biggest takeaway is kind of like I said, the reason we're doing this thing. I just think the country and indeed the world is we're at this weird inflection point where technology is drastically changing everything about human society with AI, with nanotechnology, with what's going on at CERN, Large Hadron Collider, quantum computers, all these burgeoning things that are going to radically reshape how we understand fundamental reality, as well as just the day-to-day, how we do our work, what jobs are even available. All of that is changing so fast. We've got global warming changing so fast. We've got consolidation of wealth getting sucked to the 0.01% at the very top so fast. All of this shit is it's changing the world we live in. And if we cannot come together and have a conversation, the populace, I mean, and realize that like billionaires and the people who are consolidating that wealth purposely with a design to doing it, if we don't understand they are the ones who are shaping all of this, they're having us have this fight because it's way easier to keep a divided population under control than it is a solidified one. If we don't come together and realize that like we can stop this immediately, very easily, all we all have to do is be like, I'm not working anymore.
I think about that all the time. Yeah.
That's the end of it.
Yeah.
It ends. Can you imagine if every Amazon employee was just like, I'm not doing this. Amazon's gone overnight. We all have the power to cripple these billionaires.
Totally.
And I think we have to do that. And, you know, whether or not we kind of like, I address that a little bit on our podcast from time to time, and maybe overtly or subversively, I suppose. The podcast is like about that to some degree. It's about trying to bridge that gap and make my parents understand we are not your enemies. Your children are not your enemies. It's the guy who's telling you we're your enemy.
Right.
That's the real enemy, you know? I think we all have to come to that conclusion on both sides of this thing or we're fucked.
Yeah.
That's what I hope people would take away from anything that I say at any point is like, you're yelling at the wrong guy here. I didn't set this shit up. You know, I'm not the one perpetuating this. It's the guy at the very top and all of his billionaire buddies.
For sure.
Hopefully we can come to that conclusion as a population.
Yeah. I think we can all relate, no matter where you are on the political spectrum or anywhere in the country. It's hard to fucking live right now. It's stressful. It's scary. It's hard to pay bills. It's hard to own a home. It's hard to take a vacation if you want to. It's hard to raise a child. And I think about that all the time where I'm like, what if all of us in the country just went, you know what? We're not going to work today. Yeah. Everything might implode and it might be really terrible.
It doesn't though.
But
it won't.
It proves the point.
They do this in France all the time. France has general work strikes all the time.
Right.
When they're like, we're going to change retirement age by 1 year. They're like, no, you're fucking not.
Absolutely
Nobody's
not.
going to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the whole country shuts down.
I love that.
They know how to do it. We don't have that here
No.
because I
We're
think
so
there's
divided.
like, not only we're so divided, the people who are in control of this entire system, the billionaires, they're just churning out shit to keep us placated. Are you really going to strike? There's a new season of the NFL coming out, or Bachelor. I'm addicted to fucking reality TV, Bachelor, all that shit, you know? Like, there's always a new season coming out. There's always a new shiny thing to look at. Here's a new movie. Here's a new TV show. Just keep watching this shit and go to work and everything's fine.
Yeah.
And it's this ability to say, like, I live pretty comfortably. And that level of comfort is worth kind of ignoring the problem that's happening. I don't know what the break point is for that to kind of like flip to the other side, but we got to do it at some point. It's wild to me that we all collectively have the power to change any of this shit that we want, and we just don't do it.
Yeah. We just kind of let everything happen.
Yeah.
Well, I could ask you 700 other questions. I feel like I want to ask you about aliens. I want to ask you about more conspiracies.
Please.
I want to ask you, what did you say? Astral projecting in...
Oh, yeah.
But that is a different topic for a different time.
Indeed, it is.
And where can people find you and your podcasts? Plural.
It's called The Necessary Conversation. It's on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and anywhere you listen to podcasts.
And your other podcast is?
Game of Roses. If you like reality TV, we watch it like a sport, and we wrote a book called How to Win the Bachelor, which is kind of like the Moneyball of Bachelor, where we break it down like, here's the game and how it's played. And I have been using all of my kind of raw metrics to coach people to infiltrate that show for the past 4 years.
Wow, that's intense. I have some big Bachelor fan friends, so I will be ensuring, if they don't already, I'll keep them in the know. But thank you so much for joining me, and I appreciate you sharing your insight with your family. And genuinely, I feel like I learned a few things, and I kind of am like, maybe I should go call my dad now. Just randomly. Hey, Dad, I haven't talked to you in a while. Let's schedule an hour next week. You know?
You might as well.
Yeah, seriously. Maybe I will do an episode with him and be like, what, Dad? The fuck is going on?
For sure.
It's not a bad idea. But thank you so much. And I hope to talk to you and maybe your mom and her horse and your dad. Why not? I kind of want him to shit talk me a little bit.
Okay.
And your sister, because she's like an ally.
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks again for listening to Hot Air with me, Joshua Robert, and thank you so much to Chad for coming on and talking through some things with me. If you want to stay in the loop, you can follow me on Instagram at _hotairpod. Head over to my website where you can do two things. You can send me in your listener stories and topic suggestions, and you can also sign up for my monthly newsletter, which is absolutely free. hotairwithjoshuarobert.com. New episodes of Hot Air come out every Tuesday, every Friday, and next week we are getting into spooky season. So stay tuned, stay in the know, start having those important conversations with your friends and family. Otherwise, we are just going to be screaming at each other for years and decades and centuries and millennias to come. Hope you all enjoyed this episode of Hot Air, and I will see you next Tuesday.